Then the last thing I would say that I still think is an impediment, because I'm not sure we've got good data just yet, and that has to be the pension boards. And I know there are a lot of people that will look at the pension boards and say, you're not doing a good job, or you've done this, or you've done that. I don't think we have enough good data yet to have a decision on what's happening with the pension funds, for the two pension funds that we have in the city. So now we come to the point where the governor needs to make a decision as to whether or not an EM is going to come and run the city of Detroit. I've gone on record, and I'm standing by that now. I don't believe we need an EM. But the governor will make that decision either later this week or next week. I tend to believe that he is going to make the announcement that the recommendation from the review team says we should bring in an EM. The review team a year ago came in, looked at all of our books, everything that we were doing, and they gave the governor a report at that time. They came in a month, 6 weeks ago, did another review, and gave that to the, nothing had changed. So to say that the city is now in a worse position than it was a year ago is not fact. We've made progress, if nothing more than a cash flow projection where we no longer worrying about week to week. We're talking, we've got some window of about 4 months down the road before we have a cash flow problem. And as you have read in the paper recently, there's a lot of money out there that's owed to the city that hasn't been collected. So once again, I don't want to point fingers and say who's wrong. We got to fix the problem. So having said all of that, we are now in a position that if an emergency manager were to come in, how do you work with him or her? I don't know at this point. I think there are meetings that are going on, interviews that are going on with the governor and his staff. I will tell you, there's nobody beating the door down to be an emergency manager for the city of Detroit. I mean, as the Reverend said, you know, you got people who want to run for this position. It's the same thing. Until you get there, you have absolutely no idea of facts. And if nothing else, this next term, this next 4 years, whoever is mayor is going to have a much easier job than I had when I walked in the door, because there was no database, there were no facts, the numbers were wrong. We've corrected all of that. But now we've got these plans that must be implemented. And I will give you the 5 things that I'm going to focus on that I think are most important to the citizens here in the city of Detroit. Number 1 is public safety. Public safety is the #1 issue that we've got to solve. And there are some things that are going on now that I'm not privy to tell you about publicly, but we have an organization that's getting ready to come together, law enforcement, that's going to be federal, state, the FBI is here, DEA, the Sheriff's Office, Detroit Police. All of these law enforcement people are coming together. And there's a plan that we're going to announce probably in the next couple of weeks in terms of what we're going to do with all of us coming together with these resources, so that we're going to try to take a 25%, we're trying to reduce murders by 25%. That's the biggest issue that we're going to have to deal with. Another thing that I've done is I got the top 12 business people in the city of Detroit about 3 weeks ago. And there's some technology that's available in the marketplace that I don't know that we're using in our neighborhoods. If you take downtown and you take midtown, where you got a lot of people working now, some people are living there, but you don't see nearly the level of crime downtown and midtown that you see in our neighborhoods. And a lot of that has to do with the technology that's employed by a lot of the business people. And so what I'm trying to do is connect the dots so that we can use our DPD, the Detroit Police Department, see exactly what kind of technology is being used downtown and midtown, and see whether or not we can use that and take it into our neighborhoods, because that's where our problems are, not downtown and midtown. So those things are happening, and I can't give you too much information just yet because conversations and meetings are going on, so it's not final. So public safety is #1. It took me over a year to convince our legislatures up in Lansing to help us with our lighting authority so that we can get the lights back on in our city. That now has been passed at the end of the year, and we're now starting to go to the marketplace to raise funds so that we can reinvest in the lighting system here in the city of Detroit. We won't fix it overnight because you got a grid. There's a grid system that is probably 60 or 70 years old, and nobody has ever gone in to maintain it or reinvest in it. So it's broken. So we got to put a new system in. There are some lights that will start to come on in some areas. But when you talk about the whole city, lights are not going to be on in the next year and across the whole city. It's probably going to take a 3-year period in order for that to happen. So we'll try to be as strategic as we can be, making sure lights are on in places where it can be fixed relatively easy. So that's going to happen. The third big issue that impacts our citizens would be public transportation, DDOT. Once again, legislation was just passed at the end of last year where we now have a regional transit authority. And that's going to be very, very important. But it's going to take a while because we're going to have 5 systems. And I don't think 5 systems with 5 management teams are going to be effective. You got DDOT, you got SMART, you got the People Mover, you're going to have the M1 up Woodward Avenue, and then you're going to have regional transportation. So you're going to have 5 different systems, and I don't think we're going to do a good job managing 5 systems. So we're going to have to see how we can consolidate as best we can, and hopefully over time we can get it down to maybe 2 systems. But it's important because so many of our people are dependent upon public transportation to do a lot of things, whether it's shopping, whether it's going to the doctor, whether it's going to your job, whether it's getting to school. That has to be fixed. And we've got great participation and support from the Obama administration as it relates to transportation, and that's going to continue for the next 3 or 4 years. I think the fourth thing is all of the blight in our community. 3 years ago, I said we were going to demolish about 10,000 homes. We will reach that number by the end of this year. But that's just the tip of the iceberg because there are over 40,000 empty homes in the city of Detroit. And so we have now gone out and put together a private-public relationship partnership with the Pulte family. And they're going to help us. It hasn't cost us any money yet. But what they've done is gone out and did a pilot program. And they have gone, and initially it was a 4-block area that they were going to clean up. They expanded that to 6 blocks, now it's 10 blocks. And if you were to go and see that area, you would see the value that they're bringing to the table because they've cleaned out the whole area, houses, rubbish, garbage that was in this area, they cleaned it all out. And you can see a 10-block area. Now, it's all vacant land right now. Some people say, well, that's just a preview before they come in and try and take the land and do something. That's not where their head is. They came back in and said, we want to help. And they have put their own money up. And so we've got to figure out how to utilize that relationship so we can clean up other areas like that around the city. And lastly, when we were into our budget process last year, Council came back and said we need to close down some of our rec centers, and I was 100% opposed to that. We haven't closed any of the 17 rec centers, but we have made major cuts in their budget. So I've gone out and raised money and got some commitments from foundations, from the business community, to get us some money to shore up programming for our rec centers. We've also reinstituted mini stations back into the rec centers. So, and we're getting a lot of good support from businesses that are helping us from a technology standpoint, where they're putting computers and printers and different kinds of phone lines, et cetera, because outside of church, outside of schools, the other most important ingredient in our neighborhoods will be our rec centers. because our kids can go there and be safe, our seniors can go there and be safe and use the technology and communicate better than we have. So those are the 5 initiatives that are important to me, that I think are important to our city, and I'm going to stay on top of that, and we're going to make some improvements, as you will see as we go through the rest of this year.